to Literary Lights 2025, our third annual year-long series illuminating new books by Armenian writers in English. I'm Olivia Katrandjian, the founder of the International Armenian Literary Alliance, and I'm so proud to present this series with our partners Nasser and the Zohrab Center. We have a really exciting lineup of recordings and discussions featuring new releases across genres, including novels by Nancy Kricorian and Aram Mirzoyan, new and collected poems by Gregory Zhanikyan, a collection which spans 4 decades of award-winning poetry, a bilingual edition of poetry by Tenny Arlen, written first in Armenian by an American-born author and translated into English, and a collection of essays by Patricia Kayshian. And of course, we have today's Wasafiri Magazine, Armenians Elevation, co-edited by Tatevik Ayvazyan and Naneh Hovhannisyan. I hope you'll read along with us. You can purchase books at the Nasser bookstore, online or in person, and through yalasbookshop.org website. Thank you so much to Mark Mamikonian, Judy Saryan, and everyone at Nasser, Jesse Arlen and the Zohrab Center, Yala's executive director, Hovset Markaryan, who is our driving force, and Nairi Simonian, our social media and marketing coordinator. I first spoke to Tato and Naneh about their dream of curating an all-Armenian issue of Wasafiri Magazine in 2021. 3.5 years later, I'm so honored to celebrate it with you all. They have worked with unbelievable dedication and passion to bring this landmark collection to life, and in doing so have brought together Armenian and non-Armenian writers, scholars, and translators from around the world. In these pages, Western and Eastern Armenian, French Armenian, Iranian, Lebanese, New Jersey Armenian, and so many other writers are given the opportunity to be in conversation with each other, which is a very rare thing. It has been such a joy to read this and learn from my fellow Armenian writers. It's always been our mission at Yala to not only share Armenian literature within our community, but beyond, and to foster intercultural exchange. And having this showcase in Wasafiri, a British literary magazine that publishes writers from all over the world, allows us to do that. So a heartfelt thank you to Dr. Sana Goyal, Wasafiri's editor and publisher, and everyone at Wasafiri for championing this issue and bringing it to life. I'd like to introduce Dr. Elizabeth Robertson, Wasafiri's Administration and Programs Manager, who will say a few words. Elizabeth?
Thank you, Olivia, and thank you for hosting the event. It's evening here in the UK, but thank you for hosting the event today. Just a few words about Wasafiri for those people who don't know. We are the UK's leading international contemporary literary magazine, founded in 1984 by Professor Shashila Nasta. So last year was our 40th anniversary. So this issue came out at the end of our 40th anniversary year. And it was a really special moment for Wasafiri, and this issue's been extraordinary. For Wasafiri, it's been so far, I think, our best-selling issue ever. It's been incredible, the response to it, and so much of that is down to the work that Tatevik and Naneh have done since I think the proposal maybe first came in shortly after I joined Wasafiri in 2020. So it's been a long time and a lot of work from them. So thank you to you both for all your efforts. And thank you to all the contributors. Many of you are here tonight. It's lovely to meet you all.
I'd like to introduce Tatevik Ayvazyan and Naneh Hovhannisyan, the co-editors of this issue, who will say a few words about how the magazine came to be. Tatevik is a London-based writer and producer with Rebel Republic Films and the former director of the Armenian Institute in London. She is the producer of the award-winning poetry film Tanyel, and if you haven't seen it, please do. It's fantastic. And she's currently adapting Iris Murdoch's The Italian Girl. She's a board member of the International Armenian Literary Alliance, focusing on translation projects and so much more, and of Azad Archives. Naneh Hovhannisyan is an Armenian-born writer of creative nonfiction. Her book reviews and life writing have been published by EVN Report, Writer's Mosaic, and the Cambridge Review of Books, among other outlets. She's interested in history, loss, and belonging, and she's currently writing a memoir with the accompanying radio essays.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and hello. We owe a huge debt to a number of people and organizations. But firstly, to Wasafiri, alongside our supporter, the Gulbenkian Foundation. We owe a huge debt to each other and as far as I'm concerned, this could not have happened without my amazing co-editor. But also to the community, which is unaccounted, unspecified, but which is out there, and of whose existence we were acutely aware the whole time, weren't we, Tat? So thank you for your support so far. We thought we'd start by talking about how this project came about, because there is a misconception that Wasafiri invited us. They didn't. They graciously, generously hosted us. But we announced ourselves because back in 2018, when I was making my first steps in creative writing in English, Armenia was seeing a time of incredible possibility and promise. And it occurred to me that A, I could do something about it, to participate in it actively, and B, this is a chance to bring the two parts of my life together, to, in other words, to integrate, to bridge across the gap, which all of us are painfully aware living outside of Armenia or living in English. So I approached Wasafiri. By then, I also had been aware of Tatevik's work in the cultural community in London, and particularly Armenian cultural work. And we went through several rounds of pitching, refining and rethinking our offer, which was to say, since Wasafiri has these other special issues on the Balkans, on Afro-Caribbean writing, on Palestine, why not have a special issue on Armenian contemporary writing? So here we are, 4, 5, 6 years later. And the original idea has morphed and has developed and somewhat has progressed alongside our learning. So on that note, I'd like to hand over to Tatevik, who could speak a little bit about the contents, as in how we went about filling the pages, which was inherently a subjective exercise, and which also stretched us. That.
What do you mean stretched us? It was an easy job. Hi, everyone. So excited to see all the beautiful faces and all the contributors here in one Zoom room. And thank you to Naneh for introducing the issue. When we started, I kept telling the story to everyone. It doesn't get old. When we first talked about the issue, Naneh warned me that it's going to be difficult. She said, your skull will crack. It has cracked. It's hidden under my hair. But we're so proud of what we've achieved. And like Naneh mentioned, we owe a lot to the magazine, which allowed us, not their usual 100, 120 was the average volume. Elizabeth is here, she will know. We got up to 170 huge pages and a few online pieces which are still coming. The challenge was initially just how do we define what we're talking about, because how do we define Armenian literature? It's a difficult issue, and we decided to focus on Armenian themes rather than trying to define whether it's Armenian language or English language, etc. Like Olivia mentioned, we have a huge variety of languages, huge variety of backgrounds. We have writers, we have translators, academics, journalists, artists, you name it. This particular event is going to focus more on literary aspects, so you'll have lots of poetry. It was left to me, it would have been only poetry, but oh well. Whole magazine would have been poetry. But it's a joy to share with everyone what we've done. And it was a long when I look back when we started talking about it in 2020, we went through several wars and tragedies all over the world during this time, which sort of dictated the change of the name for the magazine. Initial idea when Naneh talked about it to me was ruptures. But we witnessed so many ruptures ourselves, we decided to focus on the positive, and it became elevation. So we'd like to hope you'll find one piece at least which will elevate you, which will move you, which will talk to you. What I would like to ask everyone, just go through the pages, don't stop at this reading, find someone who is your author, who is your reviewer. We have a great review section. There's a huge number of fantastic books there. We have a great poetry section. We have a very, very unusual, groundbreaking art piece, really interesting interviews, fantastic fiction, and look up the names of translators as well. They were huge integral part of the work, and I'm proud to say we have 3 of our translators joining us, 4 or 5 of our translators joining us today. Translators have been a very important part of Armenian written culture, literary culture. We even have Armenian Church as a Tartman Chaston, translators feast to celebrate translators. This is how important they are. We try to make the issues diverse as possible, however cliche this word sounds nowadays, and introduce Republic of Armenia and Spurk equally, Eastern and Western Armenian equally, genders and ages, you name it. So here we are. I think we'd rather move on to our readings. And we have a nice selection, nice taster, like a meze of little bits and pieces to appetize you for a bigger issue. And Naneh, I think, is going to introduce our first reader, or the readers, a duo.
Our first reading comes from Taline Voskeritchian and Christopher Millis, and they will read from their translation of Krikor Beledian's Unpeopled language, published in this issue for the first time in its entirety in English. It starts at page 11. The original poem, written in Western Armenian and entitled Anjogavurt Lezu, Mantra Lebe, was published in the volume Mantraner, Mantras, in Yerevan by Printinfo Sarkis Khachents in 2010. And a little bit about the author and the translators. Krikor Beledian is a poet, novelist, and literary critic living in France, writing in Western Armenian. He graduated from the Armenian Lyceum Nishan Palanjan, Beirut, and moved to Paris in 1967, where he studied philosophy at the Sorbonne. He has written dozens of volumes of fiction and critical works. Christopher Millis's 5 books of poetry include Impossible Mirrors and translations from the Italian of Umberto Saba, The Dark of the Sun. His off-Broadway productions include his libretto for Gene Erdmann's The Shining House and Garbage Boy. And Taline Voskeritchian's prose and co-translations from Arabic and Armenian have appeared in the Los Angeles Review of Books, London Review of Books, The Nation, and Words Without Borders, among others. She has taught writing at Boston University School of the Museum of Fine Arts and conducted translation workshops in Palestine.
Thank you, Naneh. Thank you, friends. Thank you, Tatevik. I will be reading, as Naneh said, sections from Unpeopled language, Anjogavurt Lezu. The poem is in 13 parts, and prior to its complete publication in Wasafiri, parts of it appeared in other publications. But we were delighted, we're still delighted, that the entire poem in its 13 parts has found a literary home. And I want to thank both Tatevik and Naneh, and also Wasafiri, for the home that you have given to this poem. Unpeopled language. We ate salt, sand, then nettles of black snow, On the mountains now, piercing cold, the ache of extinction, with shriveled hands stuttering, the same relentless denied witness to nothing. Water grew to a throat of fire, the April scent of a scorched corpse, and here light tatters, a face freed of skin, dispersion of tin, my breath I gave to the scrapped poem. Deep in your eyes, keep the invisible. It comes with the same light every year, every day. Fire ignited by darkness, a beam facing you into your retina. No ear, no fist, no mourning, no rage and lament, nor the whisper of a prophet's breath, nothing. The one who comes with such ceremony, you wrap yourself around every moment. You are warmed by the dead's breath, which tells you a story and leaves you bereft, soars to a stutter. There, neither forward nor back, a blank caustic sky, which redeems gods only, leans over you, bows down with a dagger's whoosh, its shine blinding ash. The one who comes at each throb with the same denied utterance, the discord from rafters of bodies, holds unresolved at the apex of your muted voice, the sun rounds back toward roads of carnage. What remained unnamed revolves around you. What was lost heaves here, now. The final emptiness, your parched tongue catches fire in your mouth. Oh, you asleep everywhere, prisoner of extinction. We burned, my boy, from those waters and suns, became bone and stone. Talk to us, if you still exist, about the other shadows, about the other side. Talk if you can. I speak as you once were. How long will you exist? Will you spread with your voice those immovable suns on words? You know, oh, we dissolved, we vomited dream and language to the sand. We were cold, my boy, in those flocks of light. Now, let your words be a twig, be plank and rafter, soffit and forest, so we will be born. But let them pass through the green suns and waters. How much longer will we be a shriveled dog's carcass of a witness? Forget, my boy, so you will not forget. With the country, every picture lost.
Don't know who, someone cut the tongues from your mouths, severed meaning from my language, and there was verdant stillness on the summits of the land, and there was a stark double-edged moon forced down your throat. If I speak, I plunge into the emptiness of screams. I don't know where, on land, in the sky, when you meet the dead god of the dead, be not the creature who laps the wounded back to life, who lusts for the carcass. Break that accord we had in the beginning with him. Take them, their worm-infested body. You know. So I stop hearing the song from howling summits. It shows me a paltry country. If meaning is missing, bury the corpse of those who live in defective words, remnant, mute, insecure, putrid stench of a rotting fox. Then the apricot tree grows from bone. In your voice, you cannot hear a sometimes gasp of jealousy, a shudder of anguish, of a life at its limit that used to chill the sun. In your hand, not a word for morning or night, a fistful of earth on fire. You lost both passion and pain. You, witness to your own disappearance, forget that. This is the forgetting of all trace, because time abandoned you that orphaned day.
Thank you so much. Poignant poem, gives me goosebumps after reading and rereading it so many times. So the next reader, you have just met her, is Olivia Katrandjian, who is also a contributor as a reviewer in Wasafiri. She's obviously, you know her as the founder of Yala, but she's also a fantastic writer and a journalist. Olivia's work has been published in New York Times and Oxford Review of Books, among other places. Her fiction has been shortlisted for a number of prizes, including Luxembourg's National Literary Prize. Organizing our review section was a bit of a matchmaking exercise, and this was a match made in heaven for Olivia and books by two very different women, Nancy Agabian's The Fear of Large and Small Nations, a very innovative, courageous book, and Naira Kuzmich's short story collection, a poignant, hard, but a wonderful anthology. Naira Kuzmich had sadly passed away, but we're lucky to have Olivia today to read a section from there.
Thank you so much, Tato, and thank you both, Tato and Naneh, for including me in this issue. As Tato said, I had the honor of reviewing Nancy Agabian's novel, The Fear of Large and Small Nations, and Naira Kuzmich's short story collection, In Everything I See Your Hand. Nancy's novel has stayed with me. It's so thought-provoking that years after reading it, I think of moments in the book often. And I encourage you to purchase it and read it and share it with your friends, because it touches on so many issues that we don't speak of often enough in the Armenian community. But today I'm going to read from In Everything I See Your Hand. As Tato said, the author, Naira Kuzmich, passed away in 2017 at 29 years old, and her collection was published posthumously. So she's not here to share this brilliant collection with us. I'm so humbled to read her work. In my review, I said each story is sparsely written but bursting with intensity. They each capture this, simultaneously grief and love. My review is on 153, and I'm going to read from one of my favorite stories. It's called Miles to Exit. It's on page 63. Miles to Exit. When he tells Albert that it's not the boy's fault, Albert agrees and says, "You're right, it's yours." And maybe it is. So 3 years later, when Albert is gone, it is up to Sarkis Movsepian to teach the boy to drive. They're sitting in the brown 93 Mazda Albert left behind in the underground garage of their apartment building, and the light is so low, Sarkis can barely make out his grandson's nose beside him, and it's a big nose. Sarkis touches his own face. He's a tall man, heavy-set still, but his face is the face of an old person. He rubs down his bushy eyebrows and licks his lips, forever chapped, dead skin in the corners, moving up and down with every word. He is almost 70. Reassurance was a game he used to play with his wife, but she is dead now. Sarkis takes out his glasses, rubs it with the handkerchief he has carried with him since he was in the Soviet army, and puts it back on. He blinks rapidly, then flicks on the light. "Well, the first thing we do is what?" he asks the boy. But Armen is not like most boys. He is not holding the wheel with both hands and sitting forward, not brushing his hair back as he looks in the rearview mirror, not fiddling with the radio, trying to find the music his body is already in motion to. Armen shrugs, twisting in his seat to smile at him. The boy has always had a strange smile, very thin, disappearing into his face like he is afraid to bare his teeth. But the boy has good teeth, strong, straight. Sarkis knows Armen cleans them with threads, that he gurgles Listerine twice a day, even brushes his tongue. Other boys must also do this, Sarkis thinks, so he does not understand why his grandson does not smile like these other boys, too. "I put on my seatbelt," Armen says. Sarkis frowns. Is this a question? No. Then this is the wrong answer. First important thing. Put the key in? Armen asks. And then you are dead. First thing, you check backseat. Maybe some thief is hiding with a knife in hand. East Hollywood's not that great, Papik, but it's not Compton. I'll be fine. Armen scratches under his nose. Only 15, he has a mustache, narrow and even, as if done by pencil, closely clipped and outlining his upper lip. Sarkis hates it. It makes the boy resemble a cartoon, a strange approximation of a man. He wants to tell the boy there are other ways to prove his masculinity. Driving, for example. The mustache makes him stand out. And sometimes Sarkis worries that this is just what the boy wants, to wear the burden on his face. He looks at the boy, really looks. Armen is thin and tall, almost 2 heads above the neighborhood children. He has grown into his limbs, but they still dangle when he walks, like someone who has broken his bones, like his legs are jelly. The boy does not run. He does not lift weights. He does not swim. He does not. Armen sits. Armen stays. His teachers describe him as nice. And Armen's lashes, the way they reach his dark eyebrows curling gently into them, it made Albert furious, and it made him leave, but it only turned Sarkis quiet now. Armen's eyes are round and large and so brown they're black, but no, Sarkis can see nothing of himself there. Not Albert, not Louisa, only his wife. His lovely Armenui. Los Angeles is not City of Angels, boy, he warns Armen. Sarkis learns his English from police shows and made-for-TV movies with titles that are paired opposites, like Truth and Lies or Love and Lust. He understands that things in life are not that simple, but life is different in Los Angeles. He is not living here. Most days he thinks about dying. What a relief it would be to be with his wife once more. He pokes at the boy's shoulder, tells him, always check behind before reverse. Always, and before reverse. Put key in, after key, move this to the R letter. And at what point do I put on my seatbelt, Papik? Armen says, tapping his fingers on the steering wheel. Funny boy. Armen's nails are chipped, bitten down, but Sarkis can still see the residue of black marker the boy uses to color them in when he went on the couch, legs crossed, scribbling letters on his nails. After he stares at it for a while, an arm held straight before him, Armen will put it back on his thigh and fill it in all the white space, darkening the nails completely. Sarkis doesn't ask what the boy writes on his body, but he is thankful for his attempts to hide it. The boy must be sensible now. He is almost a man. He needs to take care. He needs to get rid of that mustache. Sarkis rolls down the window and adjusts the passenger side door mirror. He has not driven for years because he didn't have to when Albert was around, and now he won't allow himself. His friends in the building think him a fool. They tell him, you stop driving when American DMV tells you stop. But Sarkis feels the weight of his body shift, and it scares him. In the mornings, he is heavy, legs numb and tingling, feet dragging on the carpet. At night, he is weightless, closing the windows even in the heat, afraid he will be blown away. Sarkis can no longer trust his body, so he trusts in the hope that he still knows what is best. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next reading comes from Thomas Toghramadjian. Thomas will be reading from Lusine Hovhannisyan's I Want Nice Things, translated from the Eastern Armenian. If you're following, it's on page 119 in the issue. And it is an essay or a memoir piece. Lusine is a writer, translator of contemporary Russian literature, a graduate of Armenian State University, who worked as a newspaper journalist in early 90s. And she's the author of 2 books herself. Thomas Toghramadjian is a deacon of the Armenian Church and a graduate student of Armenian literature at Yerevan State University.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Naneh. I'm very glad to be here, joining from Armenia. If I could just say a few words about this short but powerful essay. I think it consists of essentially 2 halves. The first is a memoir and implicitly an elegy for the world of a small village in Artsakh during the Soviet period, and very detailed and moving childhood recollections, moving because, of course, we know and we're reminded that this world is lost. The second half of the essay is really an indictment of post-independence, post-war Armenian political culture, the culture of apathy and self-interest that led to the terrible loss of Artsakh that we've suffered. these past several years by stages. So I'll say these two halves are united by a kind of youthful sense of the magic of things. As a child, she has a sense that a pair of Czechoslovakian chamois leather shoes can change the texture of existence. Later on, as a young woman and journalist, she's moved by a vision of a blue wool coat with silver buttons that's, again, somehow connected to the ongoing revolution in Armenia in 1988 and the freedom that's going to be brought to that society. And this kind of unaccountable preoccupation with things, I think, is very movingly culminates at the end of the essay with a meditation on the things left behind, this terrible vacancy, a country left with people's homes, the objects that made up their lives, but the people are not there anymore. So I'll be reading from the beginning of the essay. As Naneh said, it begins on page 119. In my oldest photograph in 1972, I am 2 years and 8 months old in Karabakh, standing by the gate leading into my paternal grandparents' yard. My grandmother, a teacher, is by my side. There is a piece of bread from the tonir in my hand. After baking bread in the neighborhood tonir, the villagers used to set out the loaves on long boards and would offer, without fail, to cut a piece for anyone they met on the road home. My grandmother had come to bring me from Yerevan to the village. My mother had a demanding job at a scientific research institute, and there was no one to look after me. In the village, I became ill. I remember only this: the white village hospital, the doctor in her white coat, and the nurses with their endless pleasant chatter, pushing a swab dipped in iodine into my throat, and me crying and shouting in my Yerevan Armenian, "I want nice things." Much later, in the remaining years of Karabakh's Soviet history, before the First War began, we used to arrive in Stepanakert by a Yak-40 from the Yerevan airport, and after an hour's drive, we would reach the village where the first building was the White Hospital. And Dr. Arev and her staff in their white coats would spill out to the roadside to see who was coming out of the distance in the unfamiliar car, throwing up dust all along its way. And seeing me in one voice with their robust womanly laughter like bells, they would ask, "Is it still good things you're after?" And they would send off the departing car, and we would enter the village. The name of the village was Norshen, meaning new built, but the village was old. There were ruins of an 11th century Armenian monastery in the heights overhead. Ruined church walls and shrines were marked with old Armenian inscriptions, and the stone lintels over people's doors were carved with 1840, 1860, no New Year's at all. There was a library in the village and a public hall. There were film posters in the village. Twice a week they showed a film in the club. The village prepared itself for hours before a screening or any other performance. Women took off their cotton socks and put on sheer stockings manufactured in the German Democratic Republic, which were marked DDR and which the villagers called Dederonchulki. They dabbed themselves with Krasnaya Moskva perfume, powdered their faces, which were white enough already, and made their way somehow artistically to the club. The village hall was shelled in the First War. After the victory, they built a new one. But after the defeat of 2020, Azerbaijani positions appeared on a hill overlooking the club, putting it in direct sight for small arms fire. There were innumerable mulberry trees, a distillery for brewing mulberry ori, pots of mulberries boiling down into black molasses, the smell of mulberries, dried mulberries, mulberry sheets, great white linen canvases. And when the days came for shaking down the mulberries and the entire village descended to the orchards spread out in the fields below, the boys would climb the trees and the women would hold the corners of the great sheets and move right, left, right, up, down in response to directions called out from above. This was before the First War and the decades of outward Soviet happiness. After the victory, the mulberry trees became private property, and the villagers no longer went down altogether to shake the trees. The vast mulberry orchards were broken up into small plots, divided by fences. The only motorcycle in the village belonged to Ivar, the only policeman I knew. There were Baltic names in this village several thousand kilometers from the Baltic Sea. His only special duty as a policeman was to majestically patrol back and forth on his three-wheeled motorcycle over the narrow, dusty roads. Officer Ivar's family home was shelled in the First War. The red roof collapsed, and nobody lived in that house anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Such an emotional piece. Next one is a very joyful reading, I think. Lola Koundakjian will be reading 1 or 2 poems from Zahrat, who she translated. Many of you will know Lola, and I'm lucky to be on the same board at Yala with her. She's a poet, she's a translator, editor. She's the creator and single-handedly runs the biggest Armenian poetry resource online, Armenian Poetry Project. Please Google it if you're not following it. It's wonderful. I spent many, many hours there. Her third book, The Moon in the Clasp on My Hand, has won Minas and Kohar Tololian Prize. And this was one of the pieces we decided really early on, because we somehow, while Wasafiri is a magazine of new writing and contemporary writing, we really wanted to have a piece of Zahrat in there. He's wonderful, delicious Western Armenian, and I believe poets are best translators. And Lola, lucky for us, writes both in English and Western Armenian, and here is she with 2 poems, and actually one of them is her own suggestion, Harutun. So Lola Jan.
Zahrat lived between 1924 and 2007. And first of all, let me start by thanking everyone who invited me to participate in this issue and all my friends who are surrounding us today. So Zahrat lived from 1924 to 2007. Harutun is a first name as well as the meaning of resurrection, was published in Meshushenantin, Beyond the Fog, in Istanbul Aras publishing house in 2022. I will start with the Armenian original, which is not in the issue, and then the translation, which is on page 131. Thank you. Harutun. Bahe Luisa apit mech. Bahe areva bahe lusanganu polorastera. Bahe apit mech. Bin serme matneret. Ամուր թողլաշ շղթան ափիտ թնթերներուն բին սերմե մատները թող եղունքներդ մխլջին թաստագետ եկող մկաններուն մեջ թող արյուն հոսյանոնց մե ինչ փույթ չես տեսնել մութին մեջ ամուր բահե լույսը ափիտ մեջ ու խնդա եթե խավարը գդիրե չորստին խնդա եթե գմարի ջրակը պարոսին խնդա եթե գահատնի մոմը սուրբին պատկերին արջև խնդա եթե անտեղեր ես փոցե արշալույսը, խնդա եթե դժկուներ են վերջալույսին փոցերը, խնդա եթե հույսը կանթեր ես բարմանիին երազին, եթե սերը սպաններ ես գույսին սրտին, խնդա, որովհետև անցավոր է քու ուրախությունդ, բիդի թոտապե վաղը լույսը քու լուծդ, բիդի շողերը ժայթկեն ու ժաթապ մատներուտ ընդմեջեն, պարքի երկեր, հաղթության երկեր բիդի թղրտեն մութերու բալադիտ հիմերը, ջուգույթետ պտամադիտ ձիածանը բիդի բարզվի, ծողերը բիդի մակրեն արյունը եղունքներետ, արշալույսեր բիդի հինայեն զանոնք որպես նոր հարսիմը, զեպյուրներ բիդի ամոքեն ծավը վերքերուտ, պեղնար փոշիներ թնթերներուտ մեջ ժբիդը բիդի երկնեն, բիդի եսկաս նոր մարդը քու մեջդ, Բիդի հայանաս եթե լջագիմը հավելվույն մեջ դիդես զգեզ, բիդի դանիս փողը շրտներուտ, կորացնելու հանգերկը հաղթության, ու բիդի վազես թապնեպսագը զեդեղելու ցուցազնին ճակտին, բայց կես ճամփան բիդի ինաս ուժասպար, բիդի ինաս աչքերդ լույսին, որ հորիզոնեն վեր կբարձանա, մի բահեր լույսդ ափիտ մեջ, մի բահեր երազդ գուրցքիտ մեջ, մի խապեր թունս կես, թե առանց հավատքի գնաս ապրիլ, տավանե լույսը, քանի ուշ չէ տեղ, ուշուշենանտի. Resurrection. Hold the light in your palm. Hold on to the sun. Keep the moonlight and all the stars. Detain them in your palm. Make a tight fist. Let your nails sink into the muscles of your wrist. Let them bleed. Who cares? You can't see in the dark anyway. Hold the light tightly in your palm and laugh if darkness surrounds you. Laugh if the fire stops burning in the lighthouse. Laugh if the candle burns under the saint's portrait. Laugh if you've covered the sunrise with hot ashes. Laugh if the twilight's flames have faded. Laugh if you have destroyed the teenager's dreams, if you have killed the virgin's love. Laugh because your joy is transient. Tomorrow the light will jolt your bondage, the sun's rays will pierce through your exhausted grip. Songs of praise and victory will shake the dark foundations of your palace. From your thumb to the pinky, the rainbow will be revealed. The dew will clean the blood from your nails. Daybreak will henna them like a new bride's. Zephyrs will lighten the pain of your wounds. Pollen will bring relief to your ligaments. You will feel like a new man, and your reflection in a lake will dazzle you. You will hold the horn to your lips to roar the theme of victory, and you will run to place the crown on the hero's head. But midway, exhausted, you will fall. You will fall, your eyes looking up to the lit horizon. Don't keep the light in your palm. Don't keep your dream a secret. Don't feel yourself that you can live without faith. Believe in the light before it's too late. And the short one to close this section, Jamanag. Yes, Kor Amenoria, Kor Amenbahu. Yes, Kor Agama, Jamanag, yes, Kor Kichma, Kichmanal, Kortzor Anchana, Kornalov Achkad, Kichma, Kichmanal Modetza Tzmahun, Kichma, Kichmanal, O Kichmanal Shad. Time. I am a thief, robbing daily, robbing at every moment. I, a reluctant robber. Time, me, a thief, little by little, robbing ruthlessly, impoverished by theft, little by little, approaching death, bit by bit, closer and closer, closer still. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next reading comes from Margarit Ordukhanyan. She will be reading from Naneh Abgaryan's short story, Loneliness, which will be coming out as part of a collection. If you're following, page number 91. A few words about bios. Naneh Abgaryan was born in 1971 in Armenia. She's the internationally best-selling author of a dozen books, and including a trilogy about Manunia, a busy and troublesome 11-year-old, and Three Apples Fell from the Sky, which has been translated into 23 languages and won the prestigious Yasnaya Polyana Prize. Zara Martirosyan-Torlone is Margarit Ordukhanyan's co-translator, and she was born and raised in Yerevan. Got her PhD from Columbia University, and translation of Naneh Abgaryan's work is her first translation of a Russophone Armenian author. Margarit Ordukhanyan is a New York-based scholar and translator of poetry and prose from Armenian, her native language, and Russian into English. Ordukhanyan is a 2023 National Endowment for the Arts Translation Fellow and a recipient of a 2024 Israeli Translation Grant from the International Armenian Literary Alliance. Margarit.
Thank you very much, first of all, for including me among this amazing array of writers and translators, and for this opportunity to bring Abgaryan's work to everyone. It's an interesting project because I think the fact that Naneh Abgaryan actually writes in Russian really raises this question of what makes an Armenian writer an Armenian writer. And I have enjoyed tremendously working on this collection of stories, which is set in the aftermath of the First War. And surprisingly, while it's very sad, it's also sort of somehow full of humanity and optimism, and focuses on the people who have survived the war and have to somehow stitch their lives back together with what is left. And move forward, I'm also excited to put a little plug for the fact that Naneh Abgaryan will be coming to the United States in April when the book officially launches. And she and I will be together at the Zohrab Cultural Center on April 29th, I believe, but stay tuned for that if you live in New York and would like to come. I'll be reading from the short story Loneliness, which I believe starts on page 91, you said. By the time the 1,000 voices strong bird chorus unites in a powerful laudatory song and reaches the eastern hill, rousing it from its ancient slumber, Muradan's Andro has finished his regular morning route and steers his truck towards the reservoir, behind which, if you keep driving for another 30 minutes, lies a sprawling landfill. He knows this road by heart and could make the drive with his eyes closed. On the right hand stretches a cypress grove, propping up the sky with its sharp-tipped cupolas. Further down, a river snakes through thickets of reeds, its silvery scales glittering in the sun. The frogs are quiet, hiding silently under rocks, and their croaking won't be heard again until evening. But an oriole is singing, as only an oriole can, in a tender, soul-soothing voice. On the opposite bank of the river, tobacco fields are growing green, and Andro wrinkles his nose as he recalls the scratchy smell of the caustic juice permanently eaten into his mom's and Anne's hands. While he and his cousins ran around with improvised bows and arrows slung over their shoulders, playing cowboys and Indians. Andro, hey, Andro, play whatever you want, but stay where I can see you, his mother would shout at the top of her lungs when she lost sight of him. The women would position themselves on wooden benches, wrap their faces in scarves, leaving only a narrow slit for their eyes, and string tobacco leaves using long steel needles. Now, if he tuned out all external noise, he could still hear the constant monotonous movement of their deft fingers dyed black from the tobacco juice. The women would pierce the stem at the base with a needle and gently, so as not to tear the leaf itself, ease it onto the string while carefully monitoring the spacing of the leaves. The smaller ones could go right next to each other, but the bigger ones needed more room. Otherwise, they would trap moisture and rot before ever having a chance to dry. The strings of leaves would be hung, shielded by a canopy not too low, so that the sun and the wind both had a chance to frolic between them unimpeded, drying them gently and softly. The work was demanding and labor-intensive. By the end of each day, his mother's hands stunk so badly that she couldn't contain her groaning. She rubbed them with apple vinegar and rendered duck fat before bed, but it didn't bring her much relief. It feels like my fingers are set on fire, she complains. Set, he would correct her with an eye roll. Set, his mother would easily agree, but then invariably go on to make the same mistake the next day. The coffin made her look small. Her feet didn't even reach the bottom. She looked like she wasn't dead, but simply dozing, and could be startled awake if you called her. Andro couldn't get enough of looking at her. She was beautiful in that stern, primal way typical of people who live in the mountains, tall, lean, with irregular but attractive facial features. Her hands, which had been hardened by decades of manual labor, and which had known no rest when she was alive, now lay on her chest like dead weight. Wrapped in dark wool cloth, they looked like two pieces of stone that pressed her down to the ground for eternity. Andro studiously avoided looking at them because otherwise he would break into tears. Andro, hey, Andro, play whatever you want, but stay where I can see you, she would shout at the top of her lungs, squinting myopically as she strained to identify her child in the boisterous crowd. Mom, why'd you have to yell like that? He would snap at her every time. I'm afraid you may not hear me, she'd explain with a guilty smile. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret, for translating and sharing this with us. Now something very different, heavy artillery. I'd like to invite Edi Arnavoudian to talk about and read a bit from his review, which is reviewing two absolute giants of Armenian literature, Krikor Shecharens's new translations. I knew Edi's name probably before I knew anyone else's name here, because he's a regular contributor to Grong, Armenian News Network, writing pieces on literature, Armenian culture, history. And I know his love of Naira and challenge both. So when we were lucky to have these books published in a window where we could review it for Wasafiri, there was no question in my mind who is the best person to talk about them. Edi says in his bio that he mastered the Armenian language in 90s. He looks very young. I don't know his age, so I don't know what it means, how old he was, but his knowledge of Armenian and Grapal is extraordinary, and we're lucky to have Edi reviewing these books. Edi,
I want to echo the congratulations to Tatevik and Naneh for pulling off a remarkable project of great artistic value. And I'm happy to be able to propound the virtues of Naregati and Charents for a few minutes. Despite the time and distance that separates 10th century devout Christian monk Naregati and 20th century revolutionary Charents, they walk close to each other, arm in arm. Both poets feel deeply the ceaseless crises that have affected humanity and individuals throughout history. Both are driven by a fierce passion for human welfare and happiness. They're actually uncompromising militants for humanity, and their poetry is such that it is contagious in communicating the belief that human beings have the potential to create better conditions than beg your pardon, than they experience at the moment. And their poetry is an invitation to everybody, irrespective of race, gender, nationality, to participate in a human endeavor to better society. And if you look at Naregati, his conception of God and faith is spectacular. It's spectacular in the sense that it expresses a human ambition for a decent order, for a decent human relations, for a world in which human beings will live in the best possible way they can. God's defining feature in Naregati is that of lover of humankind, a phrase which he uses at least 35 times throughout his epic. God is divine omnipotence for sure, but God is also appearing in Nareg's work as an unmistakably ideal human being, an ideal of a social authority that will one day hopefully impose some decent order on society. It's almost modern, almost Feuerbach-like, in that its magisterial descriptions of God can be read as projections of humanity's better essence, as expressions of nobler human potentials and aspirations. And it's absolutely astounding. I could read for 10 minutes and more, but here are just a few samples of what his conception of God is. God is, I quote, great helper, acclaimed refuge, undiminished grace, inexhaustible treasure, refreshing rain, a servant honoring king, a poor loving protector, ever rich giver. He is the banisher of pain, the queller of anxiety, vanquisher of disease. God is a cover for runaways, a liberator of captives. He is boundless in generosity, indeed almost socialistic. You are more enriched by giving than receiving. Your treasures increase more by sharing than gathering. And this image of a decent social authority, of a decent way of being, runs parallel with repeated affirmations of human potential. I'll quote, and this is where Charents and Nareg are the same, both of them feel that human beings have a divine-like quality in the sense that they have enormous potential. And Charents is clear in one of his poems, and I quote, that as a collective force, humanity can, if they wish, infuse into suns new drives and new orbits. If they so wish, they can hurl suns upward to heaven. They can bring down suns from the sky, if they so wish. If willing to impose with daring will, inflamed by a world on fire, is there anything they cannot do, the incensed masses? And that sense of power, that sense of possibility, exists in both the poets. Their humanism and their universalism are, of course, not unique. There's nothing unique in world literature and culture. But their sort of social and national context in which their stunning poetic palette is revealed has some distinctive depth and splendor that enriches international poetry, that enriches thought and human sensibility, whatever the nationality or the person reading it. And I think that we should encourage everybody to pick up Naregatsi or Charents today, because in an era when humankind has stopped dreaming, a tragic marker actually of the degradation of our society today, we can't envisage a better society for all. Naregatsi and Charents fire in us the confidence to dream again. And that's not just verbiage. Read Charents, read Naregatsi, and you will feel the potential that we have and the potential that we're missing by not following their vision. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our penultimate reading comes from Nancy Kricorian. She's going to be reading from her essay, His Driving Life, page 100 to start. Nancy Kricorian is the author of the 3 novels about post-genocide Armenian diaspora experience, including Zabel. The Burning Heart of the World, her new novel set in Beirut during the Lebanese Civil War, published by Red Hen, is out on 1st April this year. Nancy lives in New York. Nancy.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be with y'all today. I also wanted to mention that this is my second appearance in Wasafiri. I also wrote an essay for the 2014 Palestine issue. It was sort of an overview of, it was called That Country Beyond Our Reach, Palestinian Fiction since 1967. So I'm going to read just the first 2 little vignettes from this essay that I wrote about my father, called His Driving Life. The other night, I dreamed I was in the car with my parents. My father and mother were in the front seat, he in his usual place at the wheel, and she in the front passenger seat. I was behind them in the back, the way I had always been as a child. My father pulled out a copy of Our Daily Bread, a small booklet full of Christian life lessons and inspiration, and held it against the steering wheel as he flipped through the pages to look for a Bible verse that he wanted to read to me. Dad, I said, you can't do that while you drive. It will just take a minute. I want to find the passage. If you don't put that down, we're going to have to take your license away. You need to keep your eyes on the road. That was the end of the dream, my making the same threat that had hung over him in the final years of his life. One time when I was home for a visit a few years before his passing, he offered to drive me from Watertown to Cambridge, where I was meeting a friend. I hesitated because of previous arguments about whether it was time for him to stop driving. I had said to him, using what I thought of as child psychology, it's not that you are a bad driver, it's that there are so many other bad drivers around, and at your age, your reflexes aren't what they once were. You won't be able to respond quickly enough to other people's mistakes. He didn't buy it. He was in his 80s, but he insisted that he was as good a driver as he had ever been. Another time I tried to prod his conscience. Dad, what if you hit someone? What if you run over a mother and child as they are crossing the street? He replied, I drive so slowly, I'd only bump them a little bit. On the day that he offered me the ride to Cambridge, I knew I should say no, because my acceptance would be tacit approval of his continuing to drive. He had made some concessions. He no longer drove at night. He stayed within a 4-mile radius of home, and he avoided rush hour. But my sister and I still worried. Each time I came to visit, there were fresh dents in his old car, and my mother told me in half whispers about the parking lot scrapes, bumps, and near misses. But taking the bus to Cambridge was inconvenient, and he was so eager that I relented. I'm a good driver, he said, you will see. We cruised up Mount Auburn Street well under the speed limit, and things were going okay, even at the terrible intersection of Mount Auburn and Fresh Pond Parkway, near the hospital where both my father and I had been born. As he turned onto Brattle Street on the approach to Harvard Square, I said, Dad, this is a one-way street. We were going the wrong way. As my father put on the brakes, a police car pulled up alongside us. My dad apologized profusely to the cop, who mercifully let him go without a ticket. The cop and I exchanged glances. My father and I didn't say anything, but the air was thick with his embarrassment and shame. My father started driving deliveries for the family market in Watertown when he was 10 years old and could barely see over the steering wheel. He pulled his father's white meat coat on over his clothes, donned his father's brimmed hat, and sat on pillows in the driver's seat of the truck. This was during the Second World War, when his older brother Danny, who usually made the deliveries, was in the army. My grandfather, who had emigrated to America from Adana in 1911, never learned to drive and didn't have a license, so it was up to young Eddie to deliver the Lincoln Market orders. One day the cops came into the shop saying to my grandfather, "We saw your kid driving the truck up on Bailey Road. Do you have any butter?" Sometimes they asked about meat instead of butter. My grandfather gave them butter or meat, both of which were strictly rationed during the war, and the police dropped the subject until their next visit. Or at least, this is the story my father told me. Thanks.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you. And now it's time to introduce Jesse. Jesse Siragan Arlen. He will be reading from his translation from the Western Armenian of the poetry of his late sister, Teni Arlen. Teni was author of Armenian and English language poetry, and the compilation of her poetry was published posthumously under the title of To Say with Passion, Why Am I Here? Translated by Jesse. Jesse is a scholar of medieval literature and the director of Krikor and Clara Zohrab Information Center. And he is going to read his translation.
Thank you, Naneh, and thank you to both you and Tatevik for wishing to feature my sister, Teni Arlen's poetry in the issue. Just to clarify that her book, Kirkovin Saluin Chuhosam, was published in 2021 in Yerevan by Ari Karaghanatian Himnarg with the support of the Gulbenkian Foundation. And that's available through Avril Bookstore if anyone's interested. And we are going to publish this year a bilingual edition with the original Armenian and English side by side. And that'll be coming out in a couple months and featured later on as part of this Literary Lights series. And I'm going to read just one of her poems, the Armenian original first, and then the translation afterwards. Parer. Եվ մանավանդ կյանքը մենագիած է, բոլոր շողշողուն հանդեսներեն ետք թում, խոսակցություններեն ետք առանց իմաստի, խոստումներեն ու սպասումեն ետք, պարաբ սենյակի մեջ կգտնես թում քեզ։ Անշշուկ շնչառությունդ, շփոթած խորհուրդներդ, աշխարհի կայրարությունը մեռած է, եւ Tunes. Աչքերը կկոծվին եւ աշխարհի թատրոնը կաներևութանա։ Աչքերը կբացվին ու թերասանես։ Եվ հանգարց ամփոխի մեջ թիմակներ ունիս։ Թիմակներ, որ թեմքեր կծածկեն։ Բայց ինչպես կսես թիմակներուն, մենագիած, միայնակ, գոդրած։ Parերը քարերու պես կինան, հոգնած եւ օթեղ եւ անբարժ Փերանետ, այդ նգուղը, ուր parեր կխառնվին, իմաստով, հիշողությունով, մոռացությունով։ Մոլորած անկործածութենե, parերը օդին մեջ ուրվագաներու պես կքալեն։ Այս parերը անդասանելի, մխիթարություն չեն գնար ընծայել։ Words. And above all, life is lonely. After all the glittering celebrations, after the conversations without meaning, after the promises and waiting, you find yourself in an empty room. Your noiseless breathing, your confused thoughts. The world's vivacity is dead, and you are you. Are you? Your eyes close and the world's theater disappears. Your eyes open and you're an actor. And suddenly you are in a crowd with masks. Masks that conceal faces. And how do you say to the masks, lonely, alone, broken? The words fall like rocks, tired and stale and unaccustomed from your mouth. Your mouth, that cave where words mix, with meaning, with memory, with forgetfulness. Distorted from disuse, the words walk in the air like phantoms. These words, invisible, can't offer consolation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. So moving to hear your sister's words and so lovingly translated by you. Really makes me choked up every time. Thank you. This hour and a bit just flew for me. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope this made you intrigued to go and read more. Go to the last page of the magazine if you have it. Check out everyone's names, our young contributors, our contributors from everywhere. Read their work. And thanks for being here. And most importantly, thank you to 3 wonderful organizations who made this happen. Yalla, my Yalla family. I feel very privileged to be part of Yalla. Nasser, I've been a huge fan of you. Mark, Annie, and everyone else on the team. And of course, Jesse, who we've just heard, who is also my medieval poetry teacher, who's running an amazing course at the moment. Thank you everyone for being here. And I think there will be some words of concluding words after me.
Thank you, everyone. And on behalf of the International Armenian Literary Alliance, Yalla, the Zorab Information Center, and the National Association for Armenian Studies and Research, Nasser, thank you for joining us today. And I really want to encourage everyone in attendance today or watching this video after the fact to go and learn more about these 3 organizations that partner on the Literary Lights series, all of which depend on your support to do our work. I also want to encourage everyone, of course, to get a copy of this special issue of Wasafiri, which we've heard samples of today and which is so incredibly rich. Special thank you to Olivia and Hovsep for all of their great work today and on this series in general and with Yalla. And I want to mention that the next Literary Lights event will take place on Saturday, March 22nd at 12 p.m. Eastern, same time as this. And it will feature additional contributors to this bursting at the seams with talent issue of Wasafiri. The program will be focusing on the concepts of home and homeland, real and imaginary, obviously very timely meditations at this instant, maybe at any instant. Finally, congratulations and thanks to Tatevik and Naneh and to everyone at Wasafiri for this phenomenal effort and the amazing roster of literary talent that has been brought together, the likes of which I'm not sure if I've ever seen before. So I can only applaud everyone for this incredible work and for sharing it with us today and with the world through this publication. So thank you, and I look forward to seeing you all next time.